Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Amy Rossi. I'm the Denville Township District Literacy Coach. And as literacy coach, I have the very fortunate opportunity to work with the Common Core standards, figuring out with the teachers and administrators how we're going to make these standards work for our students in our classrooms and with our teachers. So what is an academic standard? The standards describe the knowledge and skills a student needs to acquire by the end of the school year and upon completion of a K-12 public school education. But what exactly does that mean, and what does that look like? So this is one example of a Common Core standard. This is one 5th grade standard in reading of about the 40 to 50 language arts standards that 5th graders would have for the year. So it says, compare and contrast two or more characters, settings, or events in a story or drama, drawing on specific details in the text. Example, how characters interact. So basically, all schools in New Jersey and any state that has the Common Core, by the end of 5th grade, students would need to be able to do that. But as a teacher, you can't walk up to a student and say, compare and contrast characters, and they do it. So in a classroom setting, this standard does not represent one lesson or one explanation. This standard would be covered again and again and again throughout the year, multiple lessons, multiple units across the content areas, and also in varying complexities year after year after year, so that by the time they graduate high school, they've had multiple opportunities to experience this kind of work and apply it with many different types of text. So the English language arts standards are broken up into 6 strands or groups. So we have reading literature standards, we have reading informational text standards, reading foundational skills standards, which are basically decoding and fluency. As you can imagine, those standards decrease as students move up from kindergarten on. We have writing standards, speaking and listening standards, which have to do with students gaining information through listening and being able to present that information through speaking. And we have language standards, which have to do with conventions, so spelling, grammar, vocabulary work, punctuation, things like that. And then there's media and technology standards, which are not separate in the English language arts standards. They're actually woven throughout. So there's multiple reading standards that have to do with using technology, both gaining information from technology and putting information that you've learned out in technological forms. Now, the big shifts in the English language arts standards. In other words, what's different about the Common Core standards than the standards that New Jersey used to have before they adopted the Common Core standards? One of the big shifts is that students are required in the Common Core to have regular practice with complex text and their academic language. In other words, the old standards that New Jersey used to have outline skills that students would need to do to be proficient readers and writers. The Common Core standards not only outline the skills that students need to be able to do, but they also dictate the complexity of text and the type of text that students should be working with on a daily basis. And also how those texts should grow in complexity each year so that by the time they graduate high school, they're ready for the types of text and the complexity of text that they'll encounter in college or in their careers or in their daily lives. Another big shift in the language arts Common Core from the New Jersey's old standards is reading, writing, and speaking are grounded in evidence from texts, both literary and informational text. So anymore, it's not really all that we're asking students to do to provide evidence from their own experience or their prior knowledge. Now, the emphasis is really on having them present information that they learn and then back that up with text evidence. And the types of text that students are working with are different and that they're writing are different as well. Researchers found that adults in careers and in their lives the type of reading and writing that they do is 80% or above informational or expository in nature. Whereas the same research studies found that the schools at the time were only reading about 7 to 15% informational or expository in nature. Mostly they were focusing on stories and narrative writing and that kind of thing. So the Common Core has kind of tried to bridge that gap where now the emphasis is on not only reading fictional stories and writing narratives and things of that nature, but also working with a lot of expository, deep, rich informational text and writing in informational ways and also in persuasive ways, which wasn't emphasized as much with the old standards. Another big shift in the Common Core standards is building knowledge through content-rich nonfiction. It's very important that we teach our students to learn through reading so that they can be independent learners eventually in their lives. We want them to build a big background knowledge in many different topics so that no matter what they end up doing in the future or where they find themselves, they'll have background knowledge to draw upon. Now, this is an example of what reading might have looked like in a classroom before the adoption of the Common Core and then after. So in the purple, you'll see reading in a classroom before the Common Core state standards. The teacher would guide the reading instruction. The whole class or a small group would be working together. A lot of times students were all reading the same book. Most of the books they were reading were fictional in nature, stories. Lots of book-specific information. So in other words, if all the students were reading a book called Shiloh, which happens to be in West Virginia, then the class would spend a lot of time learning about West Virginia and the specific time period that the book took place in. And then they would learn all the specific vocabulary that would be in that particular book and all of the symbolism that the author used in that particular book. But the problem is, although that's all very important, when the student put that book down and picked up a different book, now they didn't have strategies to draw upon for that new text because they learned everything specific to the book that they were working with before. The teacher would ask specific questions, the students would answer specific questions, and the teacher would guide any discussion that took place in the classroom. Since the adoption of the Common Core, the reading classroom, or what reading looks like in a classroom, looks different. One of the expressions that we've adopted is teach the reader, not the book. So in other words, instead of focusing on all of the specific things that a student will encounter in one book, instead we fill students up with many, many, many strategies that they can apply no matter what book it is that they happen to encounter or what piece of informational reading it is that they happen to encounter. This way they're prepared for anything that they would happen to read. There's a lot less teacher talk and a lot more student discussion, analyzing, debating, pushing each other's thinking. A lot of the Common Core, the big difference is depth. And the way that that happens in a classroom is with student discussion and really pushing each other. Students are citing evidence for their thinking. So instead of just answering a question, it's answering a question and saying how you know that or why you think that. Students are reading a variety of text. Again, not so much focus on just stories, more so on stories and informational text, so expository nonfiction books, as well as procedural texts and opinion books and essays, poetry, anything that they might encounter outside of school. Teachers working with the whole class, small groups, and individuals so that they can tailor their teaching. All students need to be able to do the skills in the Common Core by the end of the year, but how students get there is going to look different. And so with the Common Core, teachers have the opportunity to meet each student where they're at and give them the skills and strategies that that student needs to have them achieve the skills that are laid out in the Common Core. In writing, before the Common Core, teachers would kind of assign something for the students to write. It would be very assignment driven. Again, it was mostly narrative, stories, or in response to reading. Read this, and then write a summary about it, or write what you learned, or answer these questions. The teacher provides the method of planning. So if you were writing a story, teachers would often have given a graphic organizer and laid out the paragraphs, and here's what's going to go here, here, and here. And then the teacher you would hand in your assignment, and the teacher would correct or edit your writing, right? Circle all the things that were wrong, hand it back to you, and that was your writing piece. And then the teacher would fix up your mistakes. Again, the only problem with that is that then if you have to do something independently, you don't have the strategies to plan what you're going to write, you don't have the strategies to organize what you're going to do unless somebody gives it to you, which is not, as we know, what happens after your school career ends. So now with the adoption of the Common Core, again, it's teach the writer, not the writing. So even though you're working on this writing piece, I need to teach you strategies that will not only help you with this writing piece, but with all the other writing pieces that you write from here on forward. Again, the teacher is working with whole class, small groups, and individuals, tailoring that teaching to make sure that you achieve that skill before the end of the year and move on. Students learn writing strategies to use across writing pieces. Students are writing in various genres. The students write, the three types of genres or types of writing in the Common Core are narrative, informational, and opinion. But because the Common Core doesn't tell districts or teachers how to teach that, it's not just 3 units in a year. You'll do a narrative, personal narrative, you'll do a realistic fiction piece, you'll do a historical fiction piece maybe. Then opinions, you might do a persuasive review and a research argument-based essay. So it spirals through year after year so that students experience a wide array of genres in writing. And again, students discussing their writing pieces with their peers to improve them, make them better, bounce ideas off each other. And students are researching and citing evidence. Again, this is a big shift where we're expecting students not only to write about what they know, but also to supplement that with doing some research and evidence from outside sources. Lastly, this is an example of sort of what an assignment or student work might look like before and after the Common Core in English language arts. So before, let's say the teacher assigns a topic to research in science or history. The student would independently research this topic. They would do it within a layout provided by the teacher. And often research involved reading something, one source, and then kind of summarizing it and saying what it said, saying in your own words what that source said. Now, students often select their own topics or subtopics. The teacher provides some materials, both digital and in print, but the students are taught strategies for ways for finding their own sources and their own information. Students work as research teams, again, so they can discuss, analyze, think, plan, bounce ideas off each other. Students draft, oftentimes digitally on computers. Students then revise their piece based on teacher feedback, peer feedback, new strategies that they learn, other research that they decide they need to do. And then students cite evidence from multiple sources. That's another huge shift, is that students from a very young age are expected to pull information from more than one source and kind of put that together in their minds and then explain to you what it is that they've learned by citing evidence from those sources. And again, teacher works with whole class individuals and small groups to tailor instruction. Now, on the Denville website, under academics and curriculum and program, there are these parent roadmaps available for you to download and look through for each grade level. So this is specific to grade 3, this is specific to grade 6, for exactly what the Common Core in English Language Arts, and then there's also math ones, look like in that grade level, what you can expect your students to be doing at those ages. So it looks like it's time for us to rotate already. If you have questions or questions come up as you go through the other sessions, as Dr. Paulo said, we're going to meet back here for Conversation Cafe, and I'll be here as well as the other presenters to answer those questions. Okay, thank you very much.